Hey everyone. Before we dive into today's stories, I just want to take a moment to say a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. We've hit 1,000 subscribers, and it's beyond anything I could have imagined. I'm honestly so overwhelmed with gratitude. Your support means more than words can express. It's because of each of you that this channel has come this far. Every like, comment, and share has been a part of this journey, and I'm incredibly thankful for it. I'm beyond excited for what's ahead, and I can't wait to keep sharing these chilling stories with all of you. You're not just subscribers, you're part of this incredible community, and I couldn't be more thankful to have you along for the ride. Now, let's jump into today's chilling stories. It was a Friday night, the kind that held the perfect mix of relaxation and freedom. I had spent the evening at my best friend Jake's house in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of San Bernardino, California. The air was warm, with just enough of a breeze to keep the summer evening from feeling too stifling. We were juniors in high school, and this sleepover felt like any other. Just us, a bag of chips, and whatever game or movie we could come up with at the last minute. No deadlines to meet, no parents pushing for an early bedtime. Jake and I had been best friends since elementary school. He was the kind of guy who was always up for anything. Adventurous, funny, and just a little too daring at times. I, on the other hand, was more cautious, always second-guessing decisions, thinking things through. We balanced each other out, which is probably why our friendship had stuck through the years. That night, Jake's parents had gone to bed early after serving us homemade pizza, his mom's specialty, and we settled in for our usual ritual, video games and chatting about everything from school gossip to plans for the weekend. But as the clock inched toward midnight and the house grew quieter with every passing moment, the playful energy in the room shifted. We decided to break out our old favorite, hide and seek. Jake's house wasn't huge, but it was cozy, and there were enough corners, closets, and hidden spaces to make the game interesting. The dim glow of a nightlight in the hallway was the only light in the entire house. His parents, strict but not overbearing, didn't allow us to stay up too late on our phones, but they didn't mind if we played around quietly, especially when they were tucked away in their bedroom. "Okay, here's the deal," Jake said, flipping through his phone to set a timer. "No going into my parents' room, and no hiding outside." "Got it?" I nodded, ready for another round of fun. Jake was always the one to make the rules and enforce them. He counted first, giving me 30 seconds to find a hiding spot. I darted down the hall and slipped into the laundry room, my heart already thumping with excitement. I crouched behind the door, listening to Jake's voice trail off as he started searching. "You better not be in the pantry," Jake called out, his tone dramatic and teasing. "I'm taking all the snacks." I stifled a giggle. Jake always tried to freak me out with exaggerated threats, but it was part of the fun. I could hear his heavy footsteps echoing through the house as he moved from room to room. After a few minutes, I heard his voice near the door. "Found you," he said, his voice muffled. I burst into laughter, and he caught me almost immediately. We played several more rounds, joking and teasing each other about our hiding spots. But as the night wore on, a strange unease settled over me. It was subtle at first, just a feeling that something wasn't right, but I brushed it off. Hide and seek was just a game, right? In one round, I hid behind the couch in the living room. Jake's footsteps echoed in the distance as he searched the bedrooms. The house, which had felt cozy and familiar before, now seemed eerily quiet. I could hear the soft creak of the floorboards beneath his weight as he passed by the kitchen, but then something else caught my attention. I thought I heard footsteps. Slower, lighter. They didn't sound like Jake's at all. I held my breath. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe Jake was messing with me, but the sound persisted, moving closer, then fading away. I kept telling myself it was nothing, but the unease crept up my spine. When Jake finally found me, I laughed it off. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next round was even worse. I had just started counting, standing in the hallway with my eyes squeezed shut, when I heard a soft creak behind me. My heart skipped a beat. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. "Jake?" I called. "Is that you?" No answer. I stood still, listening for any movement, but the silence around me felt unnaturally thick. I tried to shake it off and started looking for him, but he was nowhere to be found. I checked the laundry room, the garage, the pantry, nothing. Finally, I found Jake, stuffed under his bed with a grin plastered on his face. "Seriously?" I said, pulling him out by the arm. "You're gonna scare me like that?" He shrugged, his grin widening. "You're the one who looks freaked out. You sure you're not afraid of ghosts or something?" I couldn't explain it, but I was starting to feel genuinely on edge. By the time we hit the last round of the night, I was tense, my nerves fraying. It was Jake's turn to count, and I needed to find a hiding spot. I ducked into the small bathroom downstairs, a tiny, windowless room with just a toilet, a sink, and a shower. It wasn't ideal, but the lock on the door made me feel a bit safer. I crouched in the shower, pulling the curtain halfway closed, the sound of Jake's muffled counting growing fainter as I settled into the silence. But then I heard it. A faint rustling sound, like fabric shifting. It was coming from inside the bathroom. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Jake?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. There was no response. My pulse hammered in my ears. Slowly, I peeked out from behind the shower curtain and my blood ran cold. A figure stood by the sink, his back partially turned toward me. His clothes were dark, his face partially obscured by a hood, and he was holding something large and heavy like a bag or a sack. My stomach dropped. This wasn't part of the game. I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't notice me, but my lungs betrayed me with a shallow gasp. The figure's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide with surprise, just as shocked to see me as I was to see him. Then everything erupted. I screamed. The man bolted. He shoved past me and dashed out the bathroom door, his footsteps pounding down the hallway. I stumbled out after him, my mind racing to process what had just happened. I barely caught a glimpse of him flinging open the sliding glass door and disappearing into the dark backyard. Jake came running at the sound of my scream, his face a mix of confusion and concern. "What the hell? What happened?" he demanded. I could barely form words. There was someone in the bathroom. He had a bag. He broke in. Jake's parents woke up to the noise and immediately called the police. Officers arrived quickly, sweeping the area, but they found no trace of the intruder. The cops said it was likely a burglary gone wrong. The guy must have realized we were home and bolted before he could do any serious damage. That night, I couldn't sleep. It happened during a sleepover at my friend Matt's house in Fresno, California. It was the middle of July, and the heat was brutal even at night. We had spent the whole evening playing video games, cracking jokes, and watching dumb YouTube videos. By the time it got close to midnight, we were starving. Matt's parents were asleep, and the house was so quiet you could hear every creak when someone shifted their weight on the couch. The only thing we had left to eat were a few stale chips and half a bottle of soda, so someone suggested going to the convenience store down the street. At first, we were all into the idea, but then Matt started teasing me. "I dare you to go by yourself," he said, smirking. "You're always saying you're not scared of anything." "I'm not scared," I shot back. "Prove it then." It was one of those moments where I didn't want to look like a coward in front of my friends, so I said yes before I even thought it through. I mean, it wasn't that far, just a couple of blocks, but the neighborhood wasn't exactly the safest. There were always stories about weirdos hanging around late at night. Still, I figured I'd be fine. I grabbed some cash from my bag, slipped on my shoes, and headed out. The others stayed behind, laughing and yelling stuff like, "Don't let the boogeyman get you." The street was quiet, except for the sound of crickets and the occasional car driving by. The glow from the streetlights was patchy, leaving long stretches of darkness in between. I walked fast, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up on me. When I got to the store, it was pretty empty. Just the guy behind the counter and some dude buying cigarettes. I grabbed a couple of bags of chips, some candy, and a 6-pack of soda. The cashier gave me a weird look as I handed him the money. Probably wondering why a kid was out alone so late. I shoved the snacks into a plastic bag and started walking back. That's when things got weird. As I was passing this dark stretch of road near an old car repair shop, I noticed a car parked on the side of the street. It wasn't running, and I thought nothing of it until I heard the engine start up behind me. I glanced back and saw the headlights turn on. The car started moving slowly, keeping pace with me. My stomach dropped. The driver rolled down the window, and I could see a man in his 40s or 50s with scruffy hair and a creepy smile. "Hey, kid," he said. "You need a ride?" I shook my head, trying to keep walking like I wasn't scared out of my mind. "No, I'm good." "Come on," he insisted. "It's late. You shouldn't be out here alone." I ignored him, picking up my pace. The sound of the car creeping along next to me made my skin crawl. "Don't be stupid," he said, his voice sharper now. "Get in the car." I stopped for a second, looking around. There was no one else in sight. The houses on this stretch of the street looked dark, like everyone had already gone to bed. "No, thanks," I said, trying to sound calm. That's when he stopped the car. The door creaked open, and he stepped out. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. He was tall and lanky, and there was something in his hand. I couldn't tell if it was a phone or something else, but I wasn't about to wait and find out. I bolted. I sprinted toward the nearest house with its porch light on, cutting across someone's front yard. The man yelled something, but I didn't stop to hear what he said. When I got to the house, I pounded on the door like my life depended on it. A woman's voice called out from inside. "Who is it?" "Please, help me," I shouted, trying not to cry. "There's someone following me." I looked back and saw the man standing near his car, staring at me. Then, as if he realized he wasn't going to get away with whatever he was planning, he got back in the car and sped off. The door opened and an older woman in a bathrobe stood there, looking confused and concerned. "What's going on?" I tried to explain, but the words came out in a jumbled mess. She called the police and let me wait inside until they arrived. When the officers showed up, I told them everything. They searched the area but didn't find the guy or his car. When I finally got back to Matt's house, my friends were laughing and asking what took me so long. I couldn't even answer them. I just handed them the snacks and sat down, trying to process what had happened. I still think about that night sometimes. What would have happened if I hadn't run? What if no one had answered the door? The scariest part wasn't the man or his creepy smile. It was realizing how close I came to being one of those stories you hear about on the news. This happened a few years ago during a sleepover at my friend Evan's house. Evan lived in this small town in Northern California, surrounded by trees and hills. His house was one of those places where the closest neighbor was half a mile away, and everything got really quiet at night. No traffic sounds, no streetlights, just the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. There were 4 of us that night, me, Evan, and our friends Chris and Ryan. We were all around 16 and we thought we were tough. We'd been hanging out in Evan's living room, playing video games and eating junk food, when Ryan suggested we go outside. "Let's check out the woods," he said, grinning. "I heard there's an old trail that goes all the way to the creek." Evan shrugged. "It's not that far, but it's creepy at night. You sure you're up for it?" "Come on," Chris said, egging me on. "Don't chicken out. It'll be fun." I didn't want to be the guy who backed out, so I went along with it. We grabbed a couple of flashlights and headed out the back door. Evan's backyard stretched into this wide field, and beyond that were the woods. The trees looked like a black wall in the distance, and even though I tried to act cool, I was already getting nervous. The trail Evan mentioned was barely visible, just a narrow dirt path winding between the trees. The further we walked, the darker it got. The branches above us tangled together, blocking out most of the moonlight. The only sounds were our footsteps and the occasional rustling in the bushes. For the first 10 minutes, it was actually kind of fun. We joked around and made stupid noises to freak each other out. Chris kept saying he saw things moving in the shadows, and Ryan pretended to hear whispers. "Dude, stop trying to scare us," I said, even though I was already on edge. But then things got weird. We'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when we noticed how quiet it had gotten. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just dead silence. Evan pointed his flashlight into the trees, but the beam didn't reach very far. "You hear that?" Ryan whispered. "Hear what?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Exactly. It's too quiet." Chris laughed nervously. "You guys are just psyching yourselves out. Let's keep going." We pressed on, but the fun was gone. Every step felt heavier, and the shadows seemed to stretch and move around us. At one point, I thought I saw a figure standing between the trees, but when I shined my flashlight, there was nothing there. "Let's turn back," Evan said finally. "This is stupid." None of us argued. We started heading back the way we came, walking faster than before. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. They weren't ours. At first, it was faint, like someone was following us from a distance. We stopped and listened, and the sound stopped too. "You guys heard that, right?" Chris asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's an animal," Ryan said, but he didn't sound convinced. We started walking again, and so did the footsteps. They were louder now, faster, and getting closer. "Run," Evan said, and we all took off. I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life. The path was uneven, with roots and rocks everywhere, but none of us cared. The sound of the footsteps behind us turned into pounding, like whoever or whatever was chasing us was sprinting full speed. My heart was racing and my legs were burning, but I didn't stop. Chris was ahead of me, and Evan and Ryan were somewhere behind. I could hear them yelling, but their voices were drowned out by the sound of our pursuer crashing through the trees. And then I tripped. My foot caught on a root, and I went down hard, scraping my hands and knees on the dirt. I tried to get up, but my legs felt like jelly. I turned my head and saw a shadowy figure closing in. Tall, fast, and definitely human. "Help!" I screamed. Evan and Ryan must have heard me because they doubled back. They grabbed me by the arms and hauled me to my feet just as the figure got within a few feet of us. I didn't get a good look at them, but I could feel how close they were, like they could have reached out and grabbed me. We didn't stop running until we were out of the woods and back in Evan's backyard. My chest felt like it was going to explode, and my legs gave out the second we reached the porch. "What the hell was that?" Chris panted, doubling over. "I don't know," Evan said, looking toward the trees. But it wasn't an animal. We sat there for what felt like forever, watching the woods and waiting to see if the figure followed us. Nothing happened. Eventually, we went back inside and locked all the doors. None of us said much after that, but I know we were all thinking the same thing. Whoever that was, they weren't just passing through. They were hunting us. I've been to Evan's house a few times since then, but I've never gone near those woods again. Whatever was out there that night, I don't want to know. This happened a couple of years ago during a sleepover at my friend Mark's house. Mark lived in a small suburban neighborhood in Southern California, the kind of place where every house looks the same and nothing really exciting ever happens. That night, it was me, Mark, and our other friend Ethan. We were all about 15 at the time, bored out of our minds and trying to figure out something fun to do. It was around 11:30 when Ethan had the bright idea to take Mark's bikes out and ride around the neighborhood. Mark had 3 old bikes in his garage. Nothing fancy, just beat-up mountain bikes he'd had since middle school. It wasn't exactly a thrilling plan, but it was better than sitting inside playing video games for the 4th hour straight. We grabbed the bikes, turned on the little handlebar flashlights Mark had rigged up, and set off. The neighborhood was dead quiet, with most of the houses completely dark. The only sounds were the hum of our tires on the pavement and the occasional bark from a dog behind a fence. For the first half hour, it was actually kind of fun. We raced each other down the empty streets, did wheelies, or tried to in my case, and just messed around. The cool night air felt good, and the streets seemed completely ours. But then we decided to head toward the other side of the neighborhood, the older part where the houses were bigger and spaced further apart. It was darker over there, with fewer streetlights, and the roads were a little rougher. Mark said it'd be more fun because it was creepier. At first, it was fine. We joked around about how quiet it was, pretending we were in some kind of zombie apocalypse. Ethan kept making dumb noises like groaning and saying, "Brains!" We were laughing and not really paying attention to where we were going. That's when I noticed the car. It was an older sedan, maybe a dark green or black. I only saw it because we passed it parked on the side of the road under a big tree. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see if anyone was inside, but something about it gave me a weird feeling. "Did you see that car back there?" I asked. Mark glanced over his shoulder. "What car?" "The one under the tree," I said. It looked, I don't know, kind of out of place. Ethan rolled his eyes. "Dude, it's just a car. Who cares?" I shrugged, trying to shake off the feeling, but as we kept riding, I couldn't stop glancing back. About 5 minutes later, I saw headlights in the distance. At first, I thought it was just some random car, but then I realized it was the same one from before. "Guys," I said, slowing down, "that car's following us." Mark and Ethan stopped and looked back. The car was still a good ways behind us, moving slow, but it was definitely following the same path we were on. "Maybe they're just driving around," Mark said, but he didn't sound so sure. "Let's turn down this street," Ethan said, pointing to a side road. We took a sharp turn, pedaling faster now. The car didn't follow immediately, and I started to think maybe we were overreacting. But then, as we turned another corner, there it was again, coming from a different direction. "Okay, this is weird," Mark said, his voice shaking a little. We tried to act casual, pedaling at a normal pace, but inside I was freaking out. The car kept creeping along, staying just far enough behind us that it felt like they didn't want to make it obvious they were following. "Let's head back to your house," I said to Mark. We turned toward the main road that led back to Mark's neighborhood, picking up speed. That's when the car sped up too. I could feel the adrenaline kicking in as I pedaled harder. The car was getting closer, and when I glanced back, I saw the driver's window rolling down. I couldn't make out much, but I saw a guy, bald, maybe in his 40s, with a rough-looking face. "Hey!" he called out. "Stop for a second!" "No way," I muttered, pushing myself to go faster. But then he did something that made my blood run cold. He sped up and swerved slightly, cutting across the road like he was trying to block us. "Go, go, go!" Mark yelled, and we all veered off the street, riding onto the sidewalk and onto someone's lawn. The car stopped, and the driver got out. I only got a quick look at him, but he was tall and wearing a dark hoodie. He started walking toward us, fast, like he was trying to cut us off. "Come here," he shouted. I don't think I've ever pedaled so hard in my life. My legs were burning, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. I could hear the guy running behind us, his footsteps pounding on the pavement. Then it happened. I hit a patch of gravel and almost lost control. My bike wobbled, and I felt myself slipping. "Get up!" Ethan screamed, circling back to grab my arm. I don't know how, but I managed to stay upright. We tore down the street, heading straight for Mark's house. I could hear the guy yelling behind us, but I didn't dare look back. When we finally reached Mark's driveway, we threw our bikes down and bolted for the front door. Mark fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so bad it took him 3 tries to unlock the door. We slammed the door shut, locked it, and turned off all the lights. We peeked through the curtains, but the guy was gone. I don't know if he got back in his car or just took off, but we didn't see him again. We stayed up the rest of the night, scared to sleep, too scared to spespetat, jumping at every little noise. The next morning, we checked outside, and Mark's dad noticed tire marks on the lawn where the car had skidded. He thought it was just some drunk driver, but we knew better. To this day, I can't ride my bike at night without looking over my shoulder. Whatever that guy wanted, I'm just glad we didn't stick around to find out. This happened a couple of years ago when I was 17. My best friend Ben lived in this quiet suburb in California, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. His house had these huge windows in the living room that looked out over the backyard, which was surrounded by a tall wooden fence. It was a nice place, but at night it could get creepy. Ben's parents had gone to visit family for the weekend, leaving us the house to ourselves. Naturally, we were hyped to hang out without anyone telling us to go to bed or keep the noise down. We stocked up on snacks, energy drinks, and pizza rolls, and set up camp in the living room with his Xbox. We started playing around 9 p.m. and lost track of time pretty quickly. We were so into the game that we didn't even notice how late it had gotten. I remember glancing at the clock at one point and seeing that it was almost 1 a.m. By then, the house was dead quiet except for the sound of us shouting at the TV and the occasional crunch of chips. The backyard was pitch black since the porch light was off, and the only light in the room came from the TV. It must have been close to 2 a.m. when I realized I was thirsty. I told Ben I was going to grab some water from the kitchen, and he just grunted in reply, too focused on the game to really listen. The kitchen was just down the hall from the living room, and it had this big sliding glass door that led out to the backyard. As I walked in, the fridge light lit up the room, and that's when I saw it. Someone was standing just outside the sliding glass door. At first, I thought I was imagining things. The person wasn't moving, just standing there, half hidden in the shadows. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a reflection or a trick of the light. But as I stared, I realized I could make out the shape of a man. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie, and his face was partially obscured by the shadows. My heart started racing. I froze, not sure what to do. For a few seconds, I thought he hadn't noticed me, but then he shifted, and I saw his face more clearly. He was looking straight at me. I panicked and stumbled backward, dropping the glass I just grabbed. It shattered on the floor, and the sound must have startled Ben because he came running into the kitchen. "What happened?" he asked. But before I could answer, he saw the guy too. "Holy crap," Ben whispered, pulling me back. The man outside suddenly moved closer to the door, pressing his hands against the glass. That's when I noticed he was trying the handle. "Is it locked?" Ben asked, his voice shaking. I think so," I stammered. We both watched in horror as the man pulled at the door handle, testing it repeatedly. The lock held, but it didn't feel like much of a barrier. Ben grabbed a knife from the counter and motioned for me to grab my phone. "Call 911, he said. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone while dialing. The operator answered, and I quickly explained what was happening. She told us to stay put, stay quiet, and wait for the police. Meanwhile, the guy outside didn't seem to care that we were watching him. He kept trying to force the door open, pulling harder and harder. At one point, I thought the glass might shatter. Ben held the knife tightly, his eyes never leaving the man. "If he gets in, we're screwed," he muttered. The operator stayed on the line with me, telling us that officers were on their way. It felt like forever, but it was probably only a few minutes. Eventually, we saw flashing lights through the front windows, and the man must have seen them too, because he suddenly bolted. We watched as he climbed over the fence and disappeared into the darkness. The cops searched the area and found him hiding in a neighbor's backyard. They arrested him and later told us he had a long record of burglaries and break-ins. Apparently, he'd been scoping out houses in the neighborhood for days, looking for an easy target. If that door hadn't been locked, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Ben's parents were furious when they found out, and they had a security system installed the very next day. As for me, I still get anxious whenever I'm alone at night. Every time I see a sliding glass door, I can't help but think about that man and standing there, staring at me. I've learned to be more careful now, double-checking locks and keeping lights on. This happened a few years ago when I was 16. My friend Alex was having a sleepover at his apartment in Southern California. He lived on the second floor of this small, older apartment complex. The place was pretty basic, but it had a small balcony off the living room, which we thought was the coolest thing ever because we didn't have anything like that at my house. There were 4 of us, me, Alex, and 2 of our other friends, Liam and Noah. We were just hanging out, playing video games, and messing around like we always did. Around midnight, Alex's parents went to bed, and that's when we decided to crank things up a bit. Someone came up with the idea of going out on the balcony to talk and mess around. It was chilly out, but the night was clear, and you could hear the occasional sound of cars passing on the street below. The balcony had a view of the courtyard, which was mostly just a patch of grass and some bushes. At some point, Alex and Liam decided it'd be hilarious to lock me out on the balcony. I was leaning against the railing, scrolling through my phone, when I heard the sliding door close behind me. I didn't think anything of it at first, but then I heard them laughing. I turned around to see Alex holding the lock in place with a smug grin on his face. "Very funny," I said, rolling my eyes. "Let me back in." "Nope," Alex said, laughing. "You're the one who kept stealing all the health packs in the game, so this is payback." "Seriously, guys, it's freezing out here," I said, trying not to sound annoyed. Liam and Noah were laughing hysterically while Alex just stood there with his hand on the lock. I banged on the glass, trying to look mad, but I knew they'd let me in eventually. That's when I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was a shadow or maybe a cat in the bushes below. I glanced down, trying to see what it was. The courtyard was dimly lit by a few lights, so it was hard to make out anything clearly. And then I saw him. There was a man standing just outside the bushes, staring up at me. He wasn't moving, just standing there, partially hidden by the shadows. "Guys," I said, my voice shaky, "let me in, right now." They thought I was still joking. "Come on, man, it's just a balcony," Noah said. "No, seriously, let me in," I said, banging harder on the glass. My heart was racing now. Alex's smile started to fade. "What's your deal?" "There's someone out there," I said, pointing toward the courtyard. Alex leaned closer to the glass to look, but by then the guy had moved. I wasn't sure where he went, but I knew he was still out there. "I don't see anything," Alex said, unlocking the door. The second the door slid open, I rushed inside. I'm not kidding. There was a guy out there watching me. Liam and Noah came over to look, but everything seemed normal. The courtyard was empty, and the bushes weren't moving. They told me I was probably just seeing things, but I knew what I saw. We went back to playing games, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept glancing at the balcony, half expecting to see the guy standing there. About an hour later, we started hearing noises outside. At first, it was faint, like a soft rustling. Then it got louder, like someone was climbing. Alex turned off the TV, and we all froze, listening. "Did you hear that?" Liam whispered. We heard it again, a scraping sound, followed by a faint thud. I walked slowly to the balcony door and peeked out through the blinds. My stomach dropped. The guy was climbing up the side of the building, using the railing from the first-floor balcony to pull himself up. "He's climbing up!" I hissed, stepping back. Alex grabbed his dad's baseball bat from the closet, and Noah called 911. We stood there staring at the balcony door as the man pulled himself onto the railing. He crouched there for a moment, looking into the living room. His face was partially hidden by a hoodie, but I could see his eyes, and they were locked on me. Alex shouted, "Get out of here!" and banged on the glass with the bat. The man froze for a second, then dropped back down to the first-floor balcony. We heard him land with a loud thud and take off running. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later. They searched the area and eventually found the guy hiding in the bushes near the back of the complex. The memory of that night still sends a chill down my spine. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.